Good morning. Hope you're having your weeks off to a good start today. And hopefully, we're in our last week, or at least certainly winding down our stay at home order. And hopefully, some of the restrictions will begin to be lifted in the next few days. So, anxious to get back to life as normal, but not until it's safe. So we'll continue with our Bible study this morning. If you grab your Bible or take your phone, turn it on, and turn your Bible to the second Psalm. We started in the second Psalm on Saturday, and while you're finding your place, just remind you the first three verses of the Psalm are David questioning, expressing his amazement that anyone would rebel against God, that anyone would go against God's ways. And he starts the passage out with a familiar verse, which is, "Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing?" And so he is just, again, he can't understand. He's shocked at how people rebel against God. And I can only imagine what he would think if he was here today, what he would say. And so now we're going to pick up in the fourth verse where we have basically God's response to David's question. What a awesome thought. Most of us at some point in time in our life have probably asked the question, why? And it went largely unanswered. But David asked why, and God now is going to step up and give him an answer. Beginning in verse 4, he says, "He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision." God, in verse 4, we have God's response again to man's rebellious nature and attitude. It's interesting, there's three things that are here in this verse that you might miss if you just kind of read over it. First of all, it says, "He that sitteth in the heavens." If you back up and read those first three verses and look at what man is doing, what man says, why do the heathen rage? Why do the people imagine a vain thing? The kings, the rulers, they're all coming against God. They say in verse 3 plainly what their objective is. Let us break the bands. They want to break what they see as the restrictive rule of God and be free on their own. And verse 4 says that God sits in the heavens. God doesn't even get up. I think about probably all of us as parents at some time have said to a child, "Don't make me get up." And God doesn't even. Is their rebellion, their attack against God doesn't even stir him from his throne. That comes back to David's question, why do the heathen rage? When their greatest rage, when their grand objective of breaking the rule of God doesn't even cause him to get up off of his throne again. And so there's a couple things about that again, that he doesn't even get off his throne, but the fact that he is on the throne, that no matter man's rebellious nature, man's actions and choices, God is on the throne. He's not worried about his position or his authority. He's not in the least bit threatened by this rebellion of man, of the kings, of the rulers. He doesn't even again bother to get up. The individuals or the groups. Again, we talked about how this passage, the heathen represent are the larger nation groups, and then the people are the smaller groups, the ethnic groups that make up the larger nation. And no matter how many groups, no matter what nations, God just stays in his chair. He just stays on his throne. He's not disturbed. He just continues to rule. He continues to go about his business. What a great consolation for us today as we look around, and probably many of us, like David, have asked that kind of question: why do the heathen rage? We watch the news and we sometimes wonder, I know I do, why in the world does God, why did God intervene? Why doesn't God, step in and why doesn't he come down from heaven and wipe those people out? I guess my human vindictive nature. But the psalmist tells us here that this is so. It's almost like a gnat. I mean, it's so insignificant to God that he doesn't even leave his throne, that his authority, his position goes completely unchallenged. He is completely content in that. But not only does he sit on the throne, but he says he's sitting on the throne and he shall laugh. What again, an image of man. Here we have the heathen, the nations, the people, the kings, the rulers, all putting their heads together. How do we rebel against God? How do we overthrow God? How do we break free of any of His authority? And basically, how do we overthrow God? And God doesn't even get off His throne. In fact, He sits on His throne and laughs at them. He's not disturbed in the least. All the warfare, the people coming together. God's not wringing His hands. God's not sweating. He's in fact he again he finds it humorous, and I think that is one of the things that I read about this passage said that God's laughter here is actually for our benefit. It is for the benefit of His followers. That we look to our leader in a situation. Whether we look as a nation to our president or our governor or whoever, we look to them and see how they respond. I don't remember the joke exactly, but I remember a comedian talking about, I guess back in the day before 9/11, a lot of times if you remember when you would fly, the door would be open to the cabin where you could actually see the pilot. And he's talking about watching the pilot. He said, I want to see, if he looks nervous or not. I want to know how he's reacting. And so here we have this image of God laughing. And so we as His people, we look around us and we see the rebellion and the hatred for God. And then we look to God and say, okay, how's God going to respond? And God didn't even get off His throne. In fact, He thinks it's comical. He laughs at it. And so it kind of helps us to keep things in the right view. Kind of helps keep us centered where we need to be, to remember that no matter the circumstance, even when all the world is opposing God, that He is still on the throne. That He is still in charge. But not only does it say that He laughs, but it says He holds them in derision, and that is that's a laugh, not just a laugh, but a mocking laugh, a laugh making fun of their positions. Not just that He finds it comical, but he finds it. I don't even know the right word. He just I don't have the right word. I have the right action. The right kind of reaction. I think his reaction to their rebellion is kind of You're right. That kind of reaction. That's I don't know what exactly you call that, but that's the reaction I think we see here from God to their rebellion. Again, David says, why do they bother? Why do they rage? Why do they imagine a vain thing? And to God, this is vain. Their rebellion, they can rebel, and man does, and he is rebelling. But God remains on the throne and will remain on the throne. And so, we have basically, man fighting against his creator. Their arrogance, their pride, much like in Genesis with the Tower of Babel. When they had built the tower as high, they wanted to go up into heavens, and God's sense of humor is on display when you read the story of the Tower of Babel, and it says, God says, let us go down and see what they're doing. They've built this tower as high as they could, trying to get to the heavens, and still, God says, we got to go down to see their highest creation. And so here we have man trying to defeat God, and God finds it again not just funny laughter, but again that I don't know the right word. Again, that whole you're right. They're going to overthrow me. Kind of laughter at their actions, and again his response then is in verse 5 as he goes on. It says, then shall he speak unto them in his wrath and vex them in his sore displeasure. You can almost, if you think about it, you've probably seen somebody carry out these kinds of actions with a person. Maybe somebody starts to pick or bother somebody, and to start with, the guy just the other person just kind of laughs, and then it kind of becomes that you're right laughter. Then they keep on, and it moves to anger. It started out as funny, but now we're getting serious. Sometimes parents with kids, their actions to begin with are funny, and then you tell them to stop it, and they keep on, and eventually it builds to anger. And that's what we see here in this next verse when he says, he shall speak to them in his wrath and vex them in his sore displeasure. He began by laughing. They continued. And then he just sat on the throne and watched them. Then he laughed at them. Then he had a scoffing laugh to their reaction. They continued to rebel, and now it says that he speaks to them in his wrath and vexes them. That word vex is a word that we don't use a whole lot. That's not a real common word, but it literally means to be. It means to be trembling. He leaves them in. Their great rebellion has led them and brought them to a place of internal trembling. Again, think about the child that maybe is playing with his father, and the father's sitting on the couch, and he says, "That's enough." And children sometimes don't pick up all the signals and don't get it, and so they keep on. And I said, "That's enough." And then finally, the father gets angry and raises his voice and says, "Stop it." And that child now he gets the picture, and and that's God's the verse we have here is those who rebel against God. And notice something that it says there. Then shall he speak, and so it doesn't say he's necessarily done it. In other words, this psalm reminds us that rebellion, just again as with a parent with a child, sometimes we let it go, but eventually, wrath, judgment, punishment is coming. And he tells us how in this next verse. I have set my king upon my holy hill. God says, here's my plan. We've got the heathen, we've got the nations, the people, the kings, the rulers rebelling against God. God doesn't even get off his throne, and he says, you keep it up, but I have a king, that my king, that I'm going to set on my holy hill. Notice he doesn't say a king or the king or some king, but he says my king. This king is chosen by God. He has been crowned by God. And so this passage, as we look at it and kind of come to a conclusion of this section, what a plan that as we look at, what a comfort for believers today that we look around us, and whether it's Corona or any other of the things we see going on in our world, we wonder, like David, why in the world does this go on? Why is it being allowed? Why is man being allowed to rebel? Know this today, that even though man is rebelling and it may look like the world is spinning off of its axis, God is still sitting on the throne, and man's actions have not threatened him. Man's rebellion does not scare him. He is not shocked nor surprised by man's actions. In fact, he finds them comical. But the day will come, he says, when in anger he's going to speak, and he will set his king upon the holy hill of Zion. Know this today, Jesus is coming. Jesus will be crowned King of Kings, and every knee will bow and every tongue confess. It may look today like Satan is winning. It may look like the world is completely lost its mind, has completely lost all bearing. But this psalmist, these few words remind us today, and I hope they'll give you hope and encouragement throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout your life, that no matter what things look like around us, God is still sitting on the throne, and he has a king appointed for that day. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Love you. Stay safe. And we'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.